Hi everyone, welcome to the Toronto Data workshop. This presentation continues our series focusing on the intersection of data sciences and various disciplines. This week we're very happy to be joined by Leanne Trimble from the Map and Data Library at the University of Toronto. One of the defining features, I think, of universities is the fact that usually the library is the oldest institution at them. Departments and faculties come and go, but the library endures. And in this case, for those of you who don't know, libraries have a very long, very old relationship with data science, sort of going back 100 years, sort of at least. And so to a large extent, you know, the statistics department, the computer sciences department, all the rest of us are largely just pretenders in this. So very, very happy to have Leanne here. Thank you very much.
No problem. Let me just share my screen. This over. Can you see this okay?
Yeah, it looks perfect.
Okay. So, well, thank you for inviting me to talk today. So I'm Leanne. I am a data librarian. I work at the Map and Data Library here at the University of Toronto, which is inside Robarts Library. And so I was sort of approached to speak about this, or to, see if there was anyone at the library that was interested in speaking about this. And I ended up deciding to be the one to do it, but I talked to a lot of people in the libraries in order to pull this together. So it's kind of a collection of thoughts about how data science intersects with academic libraries, but I've never given a talk on this topic before. So, and I'm by no means the expert on really any of the specific things that I'm going to talk about. I'm sort of the messenger. So I hope that there's something here that's interesting and informative to you. And I'm happy to take questions. There may be certain things where I might need to get someone else to help me find an answer and follow up with you later. So it just depends on what kind of questions you folks end up having about this. But just to start off, I wanted to, I've mentioned that this was like kind of a group effort. So I wanted to give credit to all of the folks at UTL, both in my unit, the Map and Data Library, and elsewhere in the libraries, who are working in this space and who were really helpful providing me with information and helping me pull this presentation together. So a lot of people were involved in this. So as I kind of thought things through and pulled information together, it sort of seemed to form into sort of three main areas that I'm going to offer some thoughts on today. The first one being libraries build collections that form raw material that's used for data science. The second being that libraries do things internally that could be thought of as data science when we analyze the data that we collect about all of the services that we provide and assess where there's room for improvement and change in our work. And then the third is the big area of providing services to our communities. How can we support those who are doing data science at the University of Toronto community? And like all my examples and the things that I say in this session obviously are going to be about University of Toronto specific scenarios, but I think this applies at a lot of universities. And so I'll talk about each of those three things, and then I'll sort of conclude with just a few thoughts about our overall role in this area and what sort of the challenges and opportunities are. Okay, so first, collections, building raw material that can be used by those who are doing data science. And the other thing I was going to sort of say right off the top was just that depending on the perspective that you're coming from, the discipline that you work in, very little of what I show you today might be truly data science in your from your perspective. I think data science can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, and libraries are not really in the business of doing deep data science work. We're not experts in analysis, machine learning, all of these kinds of things. But I think that we do have a role to play in the support of that whole data science cycle that people go through. So the things that I'm going to be talking about might be more supportive and less deeply doing data science, if you know what I mean. Hopefully that makes some sense. So our digital collections, for hundreds and hundreds of years, libraries have been collecting books, journals, and newspapers. And in the last few decades, a lot of this has moved to digital. And so there is just a huge quantity of textual data in our collections. So not just books, journals, and newspapers, but also historical documents that have been digitized, corpora of language materials. There are lots of different kinds of forms that this textual data can come in. And we acquire this data in different kinds of ways. There are vendor platforms, and then there are sometimes local load agreements. So we actually hold the content locally on the servers at the University of Toronto. There are different kinds of rights that come with the agreements that we make with different vendors. So there's a lot of potential here, and then like a lot of challenges to overcome in terms of helping people to make use of this stuff. I thought I would show a couple of examples of sort of different ways that people are able to and are making use of this kind of content. So, for example, we have access to a platform, a vendor platform called Gale Digital Scholar Lab. And this can be used for text and data mining type purposes for historical research and digital humanities research. So this particular example here, so Gale's collection includes newspapers, books, and archival material like digitized holdings from libraries like the British Library, the Smithsonian, and others are in this collection. And this is an example that one of my colleagues put together to make a research guide on our website. And it's showing how you can go into this tool, start researching a topic. So in this case, a person's name. This person was a early 20th century scholar who traveled a lot in China as an agent of the British Empire. And so imagine that we were interested in doing some research, historical research about this person. So you can build a results set by making a search. You add the results to a content set. You can peruse the results in context, but then also do a bunch of textual analysis within this tool. So in this case, we have cluster analysis, named entity recognition analysis, sentiment analysis, and there are others in the tool as well. So this is a really emerging area that libraries are trying to support by acquiring access to these platforms that publishers are starting to put together, recognizing that people aren't just interested in reading journal articles. They want to do data science on them. They want to analyze the data in a broad scope. Another example is called TDM Studio, and the example I'm showing on the slide is their product called Workbench. TDM Studio provides text analysis tools on the ProQuest platform. Not absolutely everything in the platform, but the Workbench product includes a good proportion of ProQuest content. So again, it's a similar sort of process. And the example here I took from their guidance. And so it's an example looking in the New York Times. But this content also includes many scholarly journals. So it doesn't have to be from like a historical news type of analysis perspective. It could be, lots of research being done on analyzing publication patterns in scholarly journals by authors from certain institutions and things like that. So we select a publication or a set of publications. We refine that content in whatever way we want to, and then we produce a results set from it, which we then can open up in Jupyter notebooks and do some analysis completely open-ended, can do anything you want in this environment. So these are the kinds of tools that we're looking at supporting. But that's not the only kind of access method. That's sort of the like bundled packaged version coming directly from vendors, sort of web-based, and you're sort of like working within the environment that they've built. There's also a lot of publishers and vendors that are offering APIs now. I just took a screen grab from our website that lists all of them. This is not even everything. This is just a quick screen grab. There are lots of APIs available now. And then through our local load agreements, in some cases, we actually have access to the raw underlying data that we can let researchers access directly. And one example is the Web of Science content we acquired to load locally at the University of Toronto. And we're working on right now, figuring out how we can best help researchers get into this stuff and dig into it and do analysis on it. We also collect other kinds of data that serve as raw materials for data science, not just text, right? We have a large collection built at the Map and Data Library of all kinds of different types of data. So I have some examples: business, economic data, financial data, that kind of thing. Spatial data, a huge collection, including both vector and raster data. In the sort of remote sensing area, there's a lot of large data sets that are ripe for really interesting analyses. We recently acquired access to a platform called planet.com, which is satellite imagery over time and across the whole world, and it has API-based access as well. So there's some really cool new collections coming in. We also have public opinion polls and lots of other kinds of microdata, so individual level data, people who fill out surveys and things like that. Great for statistical analyses in the social sciences. This example is just one of our most recent acquisitions. We've got Gallup data for US and also international polling data that they've collected, and it's all individual level. And there's lots of other stuff. We also, in the libraries, do digitization projects. We create data. And a lot of these kinds of projects are like historical in nature, about sort of tapping into the data that exists in historical documents and maps and things like that, and making them usable digitally. So this project here is a screenshot from the Ontario County Maps project that my colleague Marcel Fortin has been working on for a long time. And this project is basically taking this important set of 19th century maps in, I think primarily Ontario, right? Yeah, Ontario, and putting together a geospatial database that includes like land occupancy, cultural information, all kinds of things. And specifically, you can see from the screenshot, like the names of the people that own each individual plot of land. So very rich new data source being built. The libraries also archive specific sets of Canadian government websites and retain copies of those for posterity and for potential analysis. And then we build other kinds of special collections by digitizing archival collections that are in our holdings. So that's the collections piece of things. And then the second section that I was thinking about was library assessment and how we use data science to improve our services. So we ask ourselves all kinds of questions. Who is using the library and how do they use it? What materials are they using? What spaces are they using? How well are our collections meeting our different program needs? How can we improve the diversity of our collections? What feedback are we getting on instructional offerings? Are our workflows optimized for ordering, fulfilling requests, and all the things that we do on the back end? That's just a few things that I thought of. I don't work in this area myself, so the questions are really kind of endless. And answering these questions involves thinking of things from a data science perspective. So these sort of steps here, this is obviously, this should be presented as a cycle. So the folks that work in the assessment area, they ask themselves those questions like I just showed on the previous slide. And then to answer them, they identify the data requirements. They go out and figure out how to collect that data. They process the data to prepare it for analysis, and then they conduct their analysis. And then they interpret and assess the results of that, and then use that to go back and conduct further analyses or change the methods that they were using, or find ways to acquire different data to better answer the question and that sort of thing. So this is data science work that's going on. So what kinds of data do libraries have behind the scenes? We have quite a lot. A lot of it is actually metadata. So it's the data that describes all of our collections, all of our actual data that we're serving to our users. At U of T, we've recently moved to a new platform called Alma from a vendor called Ex Libris. So this is our new library services platform. It just launched earlier in 2021 after a lot of work migrating it from our old out-of-date system. And this system manages acquisition of materials, cataloging of materials, so metadata, and then how all those materials are used by our community. And it includes physical and electronic books, periodicals, and all kinds of digital resources of all different formats. So the data in there is really quite incredible and very useful stuff that we could tap into. So there's cataloging for all of our collections. There's well over 10 million records of U of T's collections in digital and print. There is all of the usage data, the circulation of our print collection, the use of e-resources, which is tracked through a standard called Counter. And there's acquisitions and licensing data. And then this new platform comes with a business analytics platform built into it called Alma Analytics. It's built on Oracle Business Intelligence, which is a tool that libraries are really just getting started with, trying to get a sense of what we could do with it. There's also additional data that's not even in Alma. So gate counts, reference statistics, and when we say reference, we mean the questions that people ask us. So we track all of those questions, and in all of the different libraries across our system at U of T, and there are lots of them. We track information about the instruction that we do, so the workshops and class visits and everything that we do. And often there's feedback from them too, if we do like an assessment of some sort in the session itself. And then there will be usage data from third-party vendor platforms that are not part of Alma and they're not Counter compliant. A lot of the databases that I work with in the Map and Data Library are third-party vendor platforms, and they don't support library standards or anything like that. And so you can get usage data from them in all kinds of different formats. So there's a lot of different kinds of data that we can work with, but the sort of big one that's sort of really library specific is our metadata. So what does library cataloging or metadata look like? The sort of long-standing standard for cataloging is MARC. It's called MARC, machine readable cataloging. And a MARC record is a binary file, and it looks like this on the screenshot, which is rather hideous. It's full of funny characters. It's sort of like sub-tags of each of the different fields. And it's really fun to work with. And there's also other formats that MARC can be expressed in, one of which is MARC XML. And what the folks that know way more about Alma than I do at UTL told me was that our new system, Alma, actually stores all of the cataloging in MARC XML. So we loaded in a bunch of binary files from our old system and it converted them to MARC XML, but actually displays them for our catalogers in the system in the binary format like this, because it's what most catalogers are used to looking at and familiar with and comfortable with. So, but it supports both. Another metadata standard that we use at U of T is called MODS, Metadata Object Description Schema, used for digital special collections. And it's sort of like it's just a separate XML schema for tracking metadata that's a little bit simpler than using MARC. And then the other thing that's, if you are in the library field, you may have sort of heard of this, is BibFrame, which is the sort of new data model that's designed to replace the MARC standards, sort of bringing, so theoretically, cataloging into the 21st. But it's still not really adopted in most academic libraries. U of T librarians have played with it a little bit, but there are very few libraries internationally that have fully moved to BibFrame. So we have not. So MARC data, how do we analyze this kind of thing? So one option is to use a library like this one for Python that can pull the content out of these binary files and, as I sort of put the box around on the slide, move them into some kind of standard representation that we can actually work with. So an example that one of my colleagues that works in this area, Jordan Peterson, she's a metadata librarian. She's been working on doing some collection diversity analysis using our catalog records. And what she did was extracted a whole bunch of the geographic subject headings, which is field 651, subfield A, out of our bibliographic metadata and used that as a surrogate measure for diversity. And then did some data manipulation and a little bit of analysis and put the results into GitHub. So the link is there if you want to look at it more. But basically, she used PyMarc to extract the data out of the MARC records, which is like a binary file, a .mrc file, and turned it into text that you could actually work with. And then she wrote some SQL statements to clean it up. And I'm not gonna, I see that Rohan is like really closely looking at this, but I don't know anything about the actual script itself, because I didn't write it. So I'm gonna not dwell upon it because I don't know if I could answer any questions about it. And then she she brought it into, what's it called, Jupyter Notebooks, to do some analysis on it. And yeah, it's sort of preliminary at this point, but these are the kind of things that we're doing in the assessment area. Another example, this was our assessment librarian, Clara Maidenberg, did an assessment of e-journal collections, and she wanted to use two indicators: usage of e-journals at U of T and whether that e-journal had been published in by U of T authors. And she wanted to kind of bring that together. So she got the counter compliant reports, which provide the usage information. And that's what a very typical counter compliant report looks like. And then she also did something similar to what I showed at the beginning with the TDM Studio with Web of Science stuff, although she wasn't using that environment at the time. But she searched in Web of Science for publications in a certain time period that had at least one U of T author, and then extracted that metadata about those publications in XML format, and then turned it into a spreadsheet that you could work with, and then to join on the ISSN, which is the unique identifier for each journal. And I don't have anything more than this in terms of the results, but one of the things that Clara has been doing is building things like Tableau dashboards that take data that she has cleaned up in this way and give people sort of targeted options for how to explore it and draw conclusions from it. But there's a lot more than that we could do with the kinds of data that we have access to. So if we had stronger data science skills in the library, we could take our analyses further, right? So myself and Jordan and Clara, we have a certain skill set, but we aren't data scientists ourselves. So recently we were lucky enough to welcome Angeli Silva, who actually is a data scientist, And she's pretty brand new. It's like been a couple of months that she's been here, but she is a computational researcher with a focus on clustering of discrete data. And we're thrilled to have her here to sort of take this kind of work that we do in libraries to the next level. So one example that she mentioned that she's been sort of thinking about is, how can she use her skills to help us deal with data problems that we have? So an example being missing data in our reporting of gate counts, maybe because the gate was broken or the staff forgot to count the people or didn't report the data. And there are lots of different data science methods that might be able to address this kind of issue. Extrapolation based on past data, mean substitution, carry the last observation forward, use imputation or machine learning or AI models to predict. And so we haven't worked on this yet, but these are the things that we're thinking about. What could we do? And then the third area that I was thinking about is our user services. So what do we do to support our user community, the U of T community, students and faculty and other researchers who want to do data science? So this is kind of where my unit comes in, the Map and Data Library. So I like to include this slide with all of my Map and Data Library colleagues on it, just kind of let us seem a little bit familiar and approachable to you because you've sort of seen our faces on this slide. But we bring a whole range of skill sets to the work that we do. So some of us are sort of more specialized in the collection side and acquiring things and helping people to find them and use them. And others are more focused on the different kinds of data analysis tools and the things that the ways that people work with data. So we have, Nadia on the screen here is our statistical support specialist. So she's a statistics expert and she does consulting with users that have questions about statistical methods. Several people in this screen are getting really involved in all of this text and data mining stuff that I was showing you at the beginning and learning a lot about it and how we can support people with it. Dylan, as the research data management person, would be really equipped to help people with data management practices for their own work, the ways that they are collecting and keeping good track of their own data, good practices for data sharing and things like that. We have GIS specialists, so geographic information systems specialists that know all kinds of things about analyzing spatial data in particular. Just to give you a sense, I'm probably missing things, but there's like the kinds of supports that we can provide at the Map and Data Library. So we support the community in their data creation, analysis, and interpretation needs. So we do one-on-one consultations, we create tutorials, and we run workshops, all kinds of different methods of supporting people's data acquisition, their data cleaning tasks, their data visualization tasks, and their analysis tasks. And I think that our real strong suit is our knowledge of data, the specific collections that we offer in our sort of licensed realm, and also all of the things that are sort of out there on the open web, and our knowledge of sort of formats and common data problems and data sort of cleaning and manipulation. And that's sort of like our real strong suit in the libraries. We also provide a lot of tech skills training, helping people learn different kinds of data analysis software to get started with coding, that sort of thing. So we run all kinds of workshops and tutorials. I've sort of mentioned that already. And so we teach R, Stata. We're getting involved more in Python. We teach people other statistical software as well, data visualization tools, data cleaning tools like OpenRefine. We run workshops on all of those things. We're also, really engaged in sort of community building and supporting the community. So there's an initiative going on this year. It was a Chief Librarian's Innovation Grant, where we joined the Carpentries organization at a level that allows us to train like 40 or 50 new Carpentries instructors this year. And we're offering that up to the U of T community so that library staff and librarians, but also grad students and faculty can apply to come and get this carpentries instructor training credential and build their own confidence in their ability to teach basic tech skills and basic programming skills. So this is the kind of initiative that is important to libraries and that we want to be involved with. We think of ourselves as, there are a lot of situations in which we're probably not there we're not going to be that much help to the expert data scientist who already knows the methods in their area and really they're past us in terms of their knowledge of their own specific area and the methods that they're going to use. But we think of ourselves as a key support for students, particularly those who don't have formal data science training and are trying to skill up and get the skills that they need to move forward with their education and the research that they want to do. So we work a lot with folks in the digital humanities where these tech skills are new to them and they're just building them in order to apply them to their historical or other, humanities research and that sort of thing. Computing. So we have at the Map and Data Library, we have a computer lab and we also have what we call a reference area, which is not very available at the moment thanks to COVID, but in normal times, it's an area where, there are like 8 or 10 computers and people can come in and use them during our open hours and they're just sort of drop in and available. But we often let people use them. They're pretty powerful computers, relatively speaking for desktop computers. And, people can start a script running or run a process that is, too intensive for them to do on their laptop or whatever. And we'll let them run it overnight until it finishes. And we're thinking about like how is there a bigger role for that kind of support? Is that really something that's really strongly needed at U of T? It's not an infrastructure that can support like big data. It's not like a parallel computing infrastructure or anything like that, but it's sort of somewhere in the middle between, the average student's laptop processing capacity and the sort of big data analysis. And is that something that we should support more formally? So that kind of brings me to this. So what is our role here in supporting data science? And what are the opportunities going forward? So I read this really interesting article from a couple of years back. It was a US-based Institute for Museum and Library Sciences funded study where they held an event and brought together a whole bunch of stakeholders that were interested in data science in libraries. And then they sort of synthesized what was discussed and learned at that event into this sort of report. And I thought that this sort of summary graphic that they put together was pretty useful. So data savvy was sort of the state of being ready for the library being ready to support data science. And there were these 4 facets of that sort of readiness that they talked about. And so I thought I would kind of apply that to us at the University of Toronto a little bit. So the first facet being skills. So, the skill set is like an interesting thing in the library community because, I think sometimes, we have a little bit of an inferiority complex or a lack of confidence about our own skills. And I think there's also like a perception outside of the library that this kind of skill set is not really something that people expect of librarians or library staff. But that is changing. And there are skill gaps. There are areas where we don't necessarily know everything and we run into the barriers of our ability to help people. There are also always new people coming in that have new skill sets and that are helping us to build out what we can offer people at such a fascinating time, the way things are changing. And, in particular, at the iSchool at U of T now, there's like a new concentration on human-centered data science, right? Like we're going to be seeing more and more graduating students who are really, I think, interested in this area of work. And I hope that, we'll we'll be able to tap into that at U of T, and it'll be really interesting. Structures. So when I read about structures, it sort of made me think of this sort of idea of what are the institutions inside U of T, and where does the library fit in that environment when it comes to data science. So how research is changing across the board and becoming has already become extremely data driven compared to how it was in the past, and it's the whole sort of scholarly communications is changing so much because of it. So there are a lot of ways in which the library's role is changing, and where do we fit right now, and do our does leadership, not just of the library, but in other areas of the university that have a stake in this, research office, all the other things, do they all kind of understand what everybody is doing and what everybody knows and what the library can offer in amongst all of that? And I don't have any answers to that question. I just think it's we're in an evolution period right now. And I think it's just really interesting. And it made me think of the new Data Sciences Institute at U of T, and what role could the library have in being a partner with that, and what could we offer to that institute? And then the third and fourth facet were services and stakeholders. And I kind of grouped them together just because I think we build our services based on what we hear from stakeholders that they need from us. So I just couldn't quite separate them in my mind. So I think, the library has a long history of serving a role as being a kind of a community hub where people come together, partnerships are formed, interdisciplinarity is encouraged, and people feel comfortable coming in and asking questions and trying out new things. And I think that is an important facet that we can develop further in the libraries. So in terms of being a kind of a community space, like I described the map and data library pre-pandemic, the sort of reference area that we had, where people were constantly coming in, they'd sit down, they'd do some data work that they had going, and then they'd run into someone else and they'd start a conversation, or they'd talk to one of the librarians and ask a question, and then they'd end up learning something they didn't even know they needed to learn. They'd get referred to somebody else who could provide them with more information, and then they'd end up starting a research project together from it. There was all kinds of this sort of serendipitous networking going on in our space, and I hope that we can find ways to, as we start coming back into the physical spaces again, to sort of rebuild that and to make it even better. And then opportunities. So areas where I kind of was talking to some of my colleagues, and we sort of know that these things are a thing, but we haven't done a lot or been able to do a lot yet to support them, that I sort of think of as maybe areas that we could expand into, one of which being supporting research reproducibility. So we do some of this in the sense of helping people learn the sort of skill sets that they need in order to do work that will be reproducible in the future. So just good data management practices, good documentation, sharing decisions and things like that. But some academic libraries are kind of taking that even further and having sort of full reproducibility related services where they actually work with researchers and test their scripts to confirm that they can be run in other environments and are reproducible before things are deposited in data repositories and that sort of thing. So that's something for us to explore. We also sort of know our current limitations around big data, that there are potentially other collections and other tools and other computing environments that there might be a demand for that we could fill potentially, without trying to overlap other resources that we have at U of T around high performance computing and that sort of thing. And then what else? I don't know, maybe you folks have ideas. We would love to hear from you if you think there are things the library could do better or could try to do to support the work that you do in data science. So that's kind of it from me. These readings, if you're interested, are sort of diving further into the sort of actual, research that's been done on data science and academic libraries. And then the next slide is my answer to your question about books. So I thought it would be fun to ask all of those people that helped pull this presentation together what their favorite book was. So we all gave a recommendation, and they're all over the board. So they're not all necessarily connected to the talk specifically, but they're just our favorite data books. If you haven't read them already and you want an idea of something fun to read, these are some options for you. So there's 2 slides of this actually. These are 4 of them, and then there's some more on the second one. And these ones are a little bit more concrete. They're sort of coding manuals and things like that. So, yeah, that's it for me. I can spend the rest of the time taking any questions.
Thank you so much. I love how prepared you were for the book question. That's amazing. I was just going to ask if you could quickly go back to the previous slide so I could look for one more second.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Just for context for the recording, if you're watching this in 2030, the traditional question that we always ask is, what are some books that you recommend?
I got ahead.
We prompt the questioner with this one so that they have some time to prepare, and that's what's happened here. I'll stop recording at this point.